So many apologies for the slight online absence there. A bunch of stuff has been going on. One of those things is we finished the first draft of the diff white paper, which we're super excited about. That's now in some very specific people's hands for their analysis, and there'll probably be more about that very soon. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you Valentine's people out there. I'm here to take your mind off of all of that silliness and talk about what matters, which is AI and technology. So let's get into it. Before I dive into today's topic, which is Matt Schumer's post, I guess, and just the general discussion around it, I want to start by saying, if you see that I'm a little more fiery today, I'm actually trying to be extremely chill right now, even though there's a firestorm inside of me that I'm sure is going to come out to some degree in this VOD. But I want to start by saying that I don't love the hype, and I especially do not love when people use their influence to spark fear and panic. I think this is pretty low form stuff. I think it's also pretty low IQ stuff. And I feel bad for a lot of the people that don't deeply understand the technology and are very confused. And I know that's a lot of people, may not necessarily be the people on GTT, but that's a lot of people in the world right now. And because of that, software markets are in free fall, and that will probably persist for some short period of time until people put their heads back on. I am super grateful for people like Professor Galloway, who I'll drop a link to some stuff that he shared on his podcast, and how they basically disassembled this as a big nothing burger that is largely incentivized to support Matt Schumer and his personal conquest of amassing money with his AI companies, his personal one as well as the ones that he's invested in, which is unfortunate because my view of many of these things is it can take a lifetime to build trust. I know that it's taken me a very long time to amass the trust that I hope I have with some of you. And I take this pretty seriously, that I will have a lot of levity and jokes on GDT for sure. One thing that I generally don't joke around with is selling you something that is not real for my own personal interest, my own personal gain. And that seems a big part of the world today. And I'll just keep putting out content for forever to call it what it is, which is very intentional, deliberate, surgical strikes to incite fear, panic, and chaos. And it's not great. And what I found over time is that people are gullible, but they're not stupid. And they will eventually see through the facade. And once you've lost their trust, you may have lost them for forever. I know that when I was younger, I'm a ripe 51 years old now, I guess. Yeah, something like that. Just turned 51 a couple of weeks ago, so I'm still here. Words of Marcus Aurelius are in my head saying, every day matters and don't take it for granted. So I love it. But when I was younger and I was a lot more reckless, I don't think I fully understood how important trust is with people that matter, PTMs as I call them. And I would do stuff that would backfire on me. Not intentionally, just to be clear. I think that my intentions, I've always tried to have good intentions, even if my execution on those things is not great. But the short of it is I made a lot of mistakes. I still make a lot of mistakes on the daily. But I try very hard to never, ever abuse my power, my platform, my influence for personal gain. Now, to be clear, obviously, I need to eat. We all do. So I need to make sure I have like the basic stuff. But I have zero interest in being a billionaire, and I'll do things, as I think my inner circle knows, to intentionally sabotage that in the interest of just trying to make the world a better place, as honestly as I can tell it. So because I'm wired this way, and also because I made a lot of mistakes earlier, and maybe because I know software and AI a bit more deeply, I may be able to see through a lot of the smoke and mirrors. And that's what I'm sort of seeing here, is it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's very tactical maneuvering to support short-term gains, which is likely to backfire on a bunch of people in the long term, in the long run. So that's the preamble. I don't love even having to do these types of VODs, to be honest. I feel like this is similar to the chat GPT hysteria that we had several years ago, back in 2022. When was that? Yeah, Q3, Q4 of 2022, when ChatGPT 4 or something maybe came out, and it was going to change the world, and there was AI systems can write code and all this stuff, and it's a breakthrough, and there's just mass pandemonium. Now, it's not to say that transformers don't have tremendous value. They do. And neural networks as a form of stochastic ideation and rapid prototyping is very useful. However, we're now in 2026. Several years have passed, and I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing that AI is running the world. I'm seeing that AI is starting to have market penetration in very select domains, as any emerging technology should have if it's viable. And that's great. I have an AI company that we work on to move this forward, because I'm a firm believer in AI, but responsible AI, not whatever this thing is. There's many things that come to mind when I see things like this, but maybe one of the first is the Gartner hype cycle. I see the Gartner hype cycle in my head, that this is a new hype cycle of whatever Matt is talking about, and it's skyrocketed, and the markets are in a mass frenzy because somehow they got compelled, I think largely with some intentional language and analogies to COVID, which I think is pretty reckless and not great. There's a bunch of other analogies that you could use to spring this forward, like the invention of compilers, or the emergence of the internet, the ability to start controlling electricity. But these aren't nearly as sensational or spectacular. and they likely will create confidence in emerging technology, not create pandemonium. And so when I see things like this, and I see reckless language and analogies that are somewhat nonsensical. I mean, last time I checked, tens of thousands of people are not being unalived by AI. So why would we have a COVID analogy in here? COVID was a very real thing, and there's a reason why it created a lot of panic and fear, because people's lives were at stake. People were directly impacted in very profound and negative ways. And I don't know that, at least in my lifetime, that I've ever seen anything like it. I hope that we don't experience something like it. And the advancement of technology, I think, these are different domains, and different language should be used when discussing these different domains to ensure that people don't draw incorrect conclusions. Okay, so this is maybe enough preamble. Another big reason why I'm doing this VOD is several people reached out to me. I won't mention the names of these people, but they range from personal friends of mine to executives at the premier venues, institutes, what have you, as well as other leading academics that are not in this field. So I looked at it, actually, I think it was last weekend when it was first sent to me, and my assessment of this was very quickly, it was a big nothing burger. That there was nothing real here. It was just more of the same. And it maybe was interesting that there were the release of 2 new models that made forward movement in their spaces, which is great. Cool. But that's to be expected, right? That's what iterative refinement looks like. And the truth is, if we level check this real quick, these models have been in desperate need of forward movement. That, if I recall correctly, the release of things like GPT-5 were pretty insignificant. And even with all the massive compute and billions of dollars, maybe it's breaching trillions of dollars at this point, one would expect there to be forward progress. So if anything, I think that this is an intentional wedge to reinstate AI, given its vanishing presence and the state of disillusionment that people are coming to, right? I think a lot of people are recovering from that hype curve and becoming disenfranchised with the AI slop, as I think many of us have seen. And AI kind of needed a win. Now, from my perspective, AI is getting tons of wins. And in particular, one of the biggest wins that it's getting is coming from deterministic intent folding, which I think has the potential to have profound impact in a very generalized sense. And you'll probably be hearing a lot more about that, not just from me, but from lots of other people soon. And so there is actual real forward scientific progress on the frontiers of science, but it's not coming from throwing more compute and compositional novelty on things that are already massively overtaxed and overexercised, overpositioned, if you will. And that's a big part of this narrative. To take a step back, I realize I'm talking pretty abstractly, but I know the GTT audience, you guys are hyper smart. This is a 190 IQ crowd, so I suspect you're tracking. One of the things I saw recently is something about Anthropic's revenue growth, which I guess was pretty stellar. From my perspective, if you have two AI companies that are going to control our fate, and it's between OpenAI and Anthropic, I'm 1,000% on the Anthropic train. 1,000%. Dario, 1,000 times over Sam Altman. Because at least I think Dario is trying to do good. I think that he is a scientist. Even if, he's theoretical physics or whatever. I mean, scientist to scientist, I think he knows what he's doing. And I think it's good to have someone that can reason about the technology in sort of real ways. So I actually applaud Anthropic's success. I think that's fantastic. But what we're talking about here in these reports is we're talking about revenue. We're not talking about profit. And when you start to compare the revenue against the costs, to the best of my knowledge, even with massive steps forward that I think are potentially in the right direction, things like LoRa, I forget exactly what that stands for. It's on the top of my tongue here. But it's a way to essentially enhance the efficiency of language models without suffering fidelity loss. So in simpler terms, they can function like smaller language models with the fidelity of larger language models. Awesome. And they have 1,000-fold improvement in performance. That's great. Stuff like that's a step in the right direction. But it's still many orders of magnitude upside down in terms of the cost. And I'm not just talking about the monetary cost. That's one thing. I'm talking about the global costs on the ecosystem and the carbon footprint and stuff like that actually matters. Maybe it doesn't matter to the 60 or 70-year-old billionaires who aren't going to necessarily see what the next 100 years look like. But for the 20-year-olds that are just coming out of school, I think they're going to feel it really hard. And I think there is a human element to all of this, that somehow people with money that are principally concerned just with money-related outcomes are ignoring. Or maybe they're not ignoring it, but it's not a principal concern for them. But it is a principal concern for me. Because I'm going to die one day, and my hope is that I can leave this world in a slightly better state than when I entered it. And I'm far more concerned about doing small things in my life that will move the needle forward beyond the short period of time that I have on this planet than the amount of wealth that I can amass so I can live some ridiculous lifestyle that's super superficial and pretty meaningless. I mean, I know a lot of people that have amassed huge amounts of wealth that are some of the unhappiest people that I know, and all they want is meaning. Many, many people that are just striving to just have meaning in their life. And I help some of these people, actually. They're some of my good friends, right? And that's what I've been striving to do. Is maybe I figured this out at an earlier age. Maybe it's because of Nautica. Is I created Nautica when I was 24, and it was making quite a bit of money, where I was already in a position to be independently wealthy in my early 20s. And I quickly saw how meaningless my life was if all it was money. There wasn't something bigger. So the part of the story that a lot of these folks, I think, are omitting, which is, at a minimum, it's ignorant. At a maximum, it's wildly disingenuous, is the costs of these mega language, we should probably rename them from LLMs to MLMs, mega language model systems, and the overheads that they have. And again, given the decay and the full halting of Dennard scaling, just paralyzing things is not going to get us a more power efficient solution. It will give us the ability to solve these problems throwing more resources at them. The dog's getting a little chatty. It's okay. Did you get into... What's going on? Did you get into a fight out there? It's okay. Something. Merle. It's okay, buddy. Merle. All right, he's protecting. Good boy. Good job. Yeah. All right. So, the first piece of all of this is it doesn't matter how impactful this stuff is in a one-off sense if the overheads of it are so enormous that it can't be used practically, which is kind of the state of things. And until any of these companies are profitable, not just generating revenue where they're completely upside down in their costs, but they have a sustainable business model where they're making more money than they're spending. It's just a lot of this. It's just a lot of noise. It's very much like what happened with Uber, right? I'm in NorCal, and Uber came to us first, and the Uber prices, at least initially, were phenomenal. They were phenomenally good. It was 1/4 the cost of taxis, and so everybody hopped on it. Why? Because it was just less expensive. That was the primary reason. It did basically what taxis did, except it had less friction. And the big thing is it cost 25% what taxis cost. Now, that wasn't a sustainable business model. That was the typical land, expand, demand model that we've discussed so many times. You land it in a market segment, you expand it to get mass reach, and then you demand more money because you've captured the audience. And now you see that in full form. Uber prices oftentimes are worse than taxis. The Uber business model and how that was a sleight of hand is a parlor trick, and a lot of us got audience captured by it. This is the same thing. It's a parlor trick. It's an audience capture. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. Just like Uber has value, it did, and it still does. But it's not 75% less expensive than taxis, right? That's just a thing that they're selling you. And similarly, the narratives that they're going to push forward is that this is the best thing ever, that it can do, these AIs can do essentially everything that normal people can do, except it can do it at a fraction of the cost and 1/1000th the temporal window. It can 1000x the speed cost overhead. The second part is true, is it can, in some cases, do a massive amount of work in an extremely short period of time, but not without cost. And the cost is manifold. The first is that they're absorbing the costs of these in the back end because they have investors that essentially will write them enormous checks because they're more concerned simply with the land, expand, and demand model. They understand this is a highly functioning business model and it's worked in the past, and so they can have delayed gratification for their returns on their investment. The thing that gets a little wacky here is once you start scaling up the cost to have it be at parity with what the users are paying and the actual cost of the systems, the divide becomes abnormally large. It becomes unwieldy in that you're paying an AI assistant, in many of these cases, thousands of dollars to do something a human could do for $10. And it might take the human a little bit longer. So in certain circumstances, if you need a solution that's hyper fast, maybe you pay for that, right? This is like when you do FedEx overnight. Sometimes you really need the thing right now. And in those cases, absolutely, having 1,000 developers at your disposal to do rapid prototyping for a thing is really useful. And in some sense, this is part of the reason why I think it's gained such traction with startups, is startups tend to be under huge amounts of pressure to produce things in an accelerated way, no matter what the cost is. The capital investment tends to not necessarily be the major blocker. It is the market penetration, the PMF, product market fit, and the go-to-market, the MVP stuff, minimal viable product, all those things that you learn in startup school, or they teach you in like the Y Combinator stuff, YC. The point of all this meandering and rambling is simply this. This is a very lopsided, single-dimensional view of the space, and it's largely a massive snowball that has an appearance of being big and enormous and dangerous, but it's hollow on the inside. And so it looks scary, but it's just a bubble that you can just pop with your finger and it all kind of goes poof. That's this hype thing that's happening right now. I'm not talking about AI. AI is a real thing. I do think we're living in a language model bubble, or more precisely, a large language model bubble, or a mega language model bubble that is starting to course correct itself. And we're seeing all the signals for that. But AI is here to stay, I think, and that's good, right? And AI, like other technological advances, nuclear energy, electricity, the internet, these are not necessarily things to be afraid of. They're just things that we're learning about. It's stuff that we don't fully understand today, and we will grow to understand them more. Like, we're still trying to understand the internet. That technology is 50 years old, right? It has, these things take time for us to fully grok. And it's not a doomsday type of event that Matt may be trying to either intentionally or unintentionally present. I'm going to try my best to foster goodwill, but again, certain things in his essay, I think there's ways to write things that I think are going to inspire confidence in people about a more optimistic and hopeful future. And then there's ways to write things and use your influence to incite fear and panic and mass hysteria. And at least for me, I very much strive toward the former. I can certainly do the latter. I just think that it's very short-sighted. It's largely manipulative, and it's wildly intellectually dishonest, which is why I tend to not do it as much as I can. Okay, so I've got these articles in front of me, and I haven't looked at them at all this entire 30-minute rant. I'm not sure actually that I'm going to. In particular, I'm kind of nervous about these copyright strikes that I've been getting. And since I pay a subscription to Fortune, I don't even know if showing this is going to violate the terms of service, but I'm pretty sure I can show the cover of this without getting into trouble. What I would encourage all of you to do is check this article out. I've found in skimming it that Jeremy's take on this, who's, as I understand it, he's a senior editor for Fortune. Jeremy Kahn is the AI editor at Fortune, spearheading the publication's coverage of artificial intelligence. He also co-authors Eye on AI. It's interesting. I wonder if that's in relation to the New York Times Eye on AI with my friends over there. Maybe it's different. Anyway, Jeremy's take on this is, I think, pretty interesting in that he sort of gets into this, but a lot of this is he kind of takes it apart piece by piece and shows, I think, at least for me, it was pretty compelling in my skimming of it, that it's, again, not telling the whole story. There's lots of very important details that are omitted that make this not nearly the doomsday calling that is being presented. And we all just kind of need to chill a little bit. So that's kind of my advice on this. I've got my list of some of the things about Matt Shumer. I did check out his LinkedIn profile, and I wanted to bring this up real quick. And keep in mind that, as I think all of you know, even when I think people do somewhat not great things, I still am not really in the interest of picking on people. So I'm not going to do that here. I'm not going to pick on Matt. But I will draw attention to a couple things. He's talking about how the advancement of these models is going to displace all of these software developers, and the future is now basically completely in the hands of the AI. They can write these end-to-end systems that there's no human in the loop. It's a completely closed loop system, and everything's perfect. And so get ready, everybody's going to lose their job. First of all, there's no limit to jobs. There's no limit. Jobs are unbounded, right? Just think of it like this: it's a funnel that moves infinitely upwards. And all we do is we build science and technology to elide away the minutia. For example, how many of you have to do your own dishes anymore? Some of you do, but a lot of you have dishwashers. And when dishwashers first came out, believe it or not, there was probably a mass panic in the market for the dishwashers, the people that actually wash the dishes, because that was their job, and there were a lot of them. So what were they going to do? Well, they did other stuff, like rinse the dishes and put the dishes in the dishwasher. And all this did was, it didn't remove the importance or the need for these people. It elevated them so they could function at a higher level of abstraction. That we are automating away the lower level grunt work so we can function at higher orders of capacity. And there is no limit, right? Like the example that I fall back on is this. It is a mathematical inevitability that if we do not become a multi-planetary species, we are going to have an extinction event on Earth that will wipe out the entire human race. It's a mathematical inevitability. It will happen. Not a question of if, it's just a question of when. So let's consider this for a second. If all the smart people on the planet know this, and they do, we're all in agreement. All of the adults at the table, we all know it's coming. Why is it that we are not yet a multi-planetary species if this is a real problem that must be solved? The reason why is very simple. We have not yet developed the technology to support the infrastructure to get off this planet and terraform and colonize another planet. We would like to do this. We need to do this, but we are not sufficiently advanced technologically to do this yet. So when we have AI systems that can help us write the scaffolding code, we can work on those problems. And that's not the only problem that we haven't solved. Cancer, longevity, right? Like bio-augmentation to make us not just function at parity, right, like these, but to make us function at higher levels. Like you see, I mean, this is kind of a crude example, but things like hair dye. You know, some people don't use hair dye, but some people do. And why do they do this? Is it has like the appearance of elevating us to, I mean, it's largely superficial. Again, terrible analogy. But it presents this notion of youthfulness so we can pretend to be living longer. But there are other things that we've done that do actually enhance our lives, if not extend longevity. So, for example, many of you know that I had full reconstructive shoulder surgery recently. And that technology, the ability to perform this hyper advanced surgery that took 7 hours, an entire orchestra of surgeons to perform. We certainly did not have this ability 100 years ago. Did we even have it 50 years ago? I don't know. The point is that every time we have these movements forward in technology through various forms of automation, it is not a displacement mechanism to make us jobless. It is an elevation, at least it's the way I think about it, to make us capable of working on the harder problems, the problems that we really need to be working on to move our species forward. And that's great. So this fear thing of everybody needs to be terrified and the market's in free fall and none of us are going to have jobs is completely mindless and pointless. That it's so, we've done this so many times. The movement of the horse carriage to an automobile, the evolution of modems on the internet to fiber, the advancement in television technology from huge CRTs to flat panels, the advancement of technology to elide away the need for wires to move into wireless technology. Each one of these disruptive steps that I just mentioned have caused displacement in some capacity for people that worked in those industries. The horse carriage people were not driving horse carriages anymore. They were driving cars. The people that were working on the modems were not working on modems anymore. They're working on fiber and infrastructure for broadband and high speed. The people that would do the repair and the building of the CRT TVs, we're not doing that. Now they work on flat panels, right? Each one of these steps forward doesn't create these spaces where people don't have work. They do the opposite. They create more opportunities for work. There are more things. So, yes, that is the future in some capacity. I think that we are all going to have to embrace AI. And frankly, I love it. AI makes me significantly faster. I'll rabbit hole a little bit here. I got contacted by a new potential sponsor last night that I'd never heard of before. They told me they love the channel, which is awesome. I enjoy hearing that. And they want to create a partnership to highlight their AI product that actually, again, works in the software space. And I did a small amount of research on them last night, and I found that I really like them. I really like what they're doing. I like their mission. They're very security minded in a space where there's lots of people that are not security minded. And of course, as I think all of you know, I'm very, very concerned. I will not work with companies that I think are not being intentional good actors. The things that drive me in life are not the mass accumulation of wealth. It is to work on exceptionally hard problems that will push our species forward and other species forward, right? Because I got to tell you, I'm not going to Mars if my dogs can't come with me. So it's not just about us, right? We got this symbiotic relation, or at least I do, with some of these other animals that are far more meaningful, I think, than a lot of people may realize, or maybe they do realize. But anyway, the point of all this is I was rabbit holing on this company, and something kind of novel happened. Is I realized I want to work with these guys. So then what I did is I have sort of the normal fees that I charge to work with folks, but I revised it. I specialized it for this new collaborator, and I used AI to do it in 100x the time. Okay, maybe that's an exaggeration. 10x the time that I would have been able to do it on my own. And really, it was a conversation. It was me and Gemini going back and forth, arguing about stuff. And again, Gemini not being able to do simple things I kept asking it to do. So, sorry, Matt. Humans are still in the loop. If you want it to be right, if you want it to be slop, yes, you can closed loop it till the sun goes down. But other high-quality, world-class humans are probably not going to find that acceptable. At least I generally don't. And I don't think the people that I'm intending to work with in this particular case would. So last night, as an example of this technology, I was able to do something that I'm happy about. It's not perfect, but I think in terms of leveling me up, I probably would have been maybe at an A-, because I need to get this to them immediately. They want to go like right now. So, and I had other people that I was talking to. I was multitasking. So I could delegate it out to the AI and make it do work for me. And it did B+ work. And it just made things better, right? Did it take my job? Was this company reaching out to the AI to say, we want to collaborate with you? It wasn't. It was talking to me. And that's the same old story. So there's nothing new here. It's something that sometimes I'm very confused about whether people know that there's nothing new and they're just trying to create a spectacle, or if it's genuine. And at least for me, when I was younger, maybe several decades ago when I was Matt's age, and again, I'm not trying to knock on Matt at all. 100% is not what I do. I'm not going to knock on him at all, even if I'm not thrilled with what he put together. But, I see that he's early in his career. He seems to be having a great career. So, it's awesome for him. I'm really happy about that. But has he seen multiple apocalypses like I have? Maybe not. So from his perspective, it may feel as though this is the event of the lifetime. But for people like me and Gary Marcus and Jan LeCun and others, not that I'm, just talking about people that are seen a couple sunsets, we've seen this before. And this isn't something to panic about. It's not really all that disruptive. It will help us. And me personally, I'm super excited about that. Like, we have, as I've said many times, we have infinite amounts of software that we need to write. And this is why we created Merly, right? This is why I left Intel to do Merly. Is life was great at Intel. I was having the time of my life. I mean, I finally was running my own lab that I had founded, and I could have one foot in academia. By leaving Intel, all I did was inflict mass amounts of pain and suffering on my life. But I think that it added meaning. And it's, I follow the teachings of Marcus Aurelius. I think that suffering is very intentional suffering that is going to help you grow is one of the most meaningful things that you can do in life. And I seek that out. I go out of my way to suffer more because I want to level myself up. I want to work with other people that want to level themselves up. And in the quest of doing Merly, I found other like-minded people that are wired the same way that I am, and really want to do profound things, no matter how hard it's going to make their life. So all of this is a very long-winded way of saying that this is another form of automation. We are making small footsteps forward, which is about all. We have needed something to accelerate the advancement of software development for a very long time. That in some sense, I think software was stagnating to create more software. But not just more software, more reliable software. And from my perspective, I think that if I rabbit hole a little bit more, in my lifetime, I think there have been 3 major disruption points that have moved us forward in an extremely positive way for the advancement of software, which I believe is the fundamental ingredient to almost all forms of technological advancement. And I realize that may sound somewhat of a centrist view and self-interested because I'm a software person. I build software that does stuff for a variety of different domains. And software is highly valuable for that because it's virtual. It doesn't necessarily have a physical presence, which is why it is unbounded. It's limitless. And I think that's a very important characteristic. It's similar to mathematics, because mathematics is unbounded, it's limitless. And that's why these are like the building blocks to push kind of all these other things forward. So if software is the building block to push all domains forward, which I think that it is. I'm not saying it's the only piece. And I'm not saying that it's the most important piece for all domains. I'm just saying it's a foundational element, very much like logic is to almost anything, or basic mathematics are for any field. Find a field and show me that it has no math or logic, and I will show you a field that basically doesn't exist, or at least not a field of hard science. So in the space of software development in my life, I believe there have been 3 massive disruptive points that have leapfrogged us forward. The first is the invention of the internet. What the internet did is it created a gateway for us to become more connected and work together in a virtual way that has enhanced collaboration and our ability to increase our productivity. The second piece is open source. The open source movement has also bridged a lot of gaps by allowing more collaboration and getting the entire human race to work on common components that are the building block for almost all software systems that exist today. And that is a massive step forward. The third is machine programming, or what people sometimes refer to as AI for code or whatever. I call it machine programming because that's what I teach at the university, and that's the thing that's the term we use for the 3 pillars paper and all this, and it's a very intentional phrase to capture what we're doing. And that piece is also critical for automation components. It's not meant to replace anybody. It's meant to augment us, to make us faster and better. But the core charter of machine programming, as was the case in 2016, and is still the case a decade later, is there are 2 fundamental tenets of machine programming. The first is machine programming systems must improve things from a temporal angle. They have to make us faster. If they don't make us faster, then why are we using it? If it's slowing us down, I don't know that that's all that helpful. The second piece is it must have at least parity, if not improved degrees of quality. In my mind, it needs to have superhuman quality characteristics. And you need these in tandem. If you just have one, it's insufficient. If you just have quality, but it takes you 100x longer, I don't know if that's going to get us to another planet very fast. If it just moves us fast, but it's just slop, I also don't know that that's really that helpful. And this is the stuff that matters to me. This is the future that we're working on at Merle and with my colleagues in academia, all of this type of stuff. And that second piece, the quality piece, is something that is sorely still lacking. It has improved, but not with the right dimensional characteristics on the systems that exist today. That even with things like LoRa or other mechanisms that we've used historically, like dropout or what have you, the cost overhead in terms of compute is still far too significant for this to be relied on and applicable ubiquitously. But at least the things that I'm working on now, especially with diff, I think that we're starting to bridge that divide. If nothing else, I appreciate that Matt has he's, I think, given us focus to bring attention to the fact that there are things going on with AI and software, and that's good. Is it a bit overhypey and maybe could have been written in a way that didn't create so much panic? Yeah, I think so. At the same time, nobody's perfect. right? I'm not perfect. I mess things up all the time. And so I encourage all of you to let's not beat up Matt. Let's foster goodwill. We can take the output of this and leverage this in a way that is pushing us forward. Part of that is getting people to realize some of the classical ways of doing software that are a bit cumbersome and slow do need to move forward, and it would improve things. That we need to look at things from a different angle and consider some of the important stuff that's happening with AI. I think maybe the part that is actually very helpful is Matt's attention to this, I think, is if we assume for a moment that this is the future that we're headed toward, which in my mind is not the job displacement or market fallout or no need for software developers or whatever, it is that AI is going to be assisting with software creation. I think that's absolutely right. One of the things we need to solve as a first order concern is we need to make these systems far more reliable in terms of security. And that's the security, the quality, all this stuff falls into that second tenet of machine programming. And it's good in some sense that Matt is raising these things, because it is helping, I think, the commercial side of big tech to take this seriously and consider what it would take to improve their velocity and leverage this stuff in production systems, which historically I think that we maybe haven't seen, but I think that we can, as long as we get the right people at the table. So let's get the right people at the table.